I've learned that people reveal themselves fastest when they think you can't elevate them. I'm not talking about kindness in hard times. I'm talking about respect when there's nothing obvious to gain. At 31, I was financially independent, professionally secure, and emotionally cautious. Not because life had broken me, but because I'd watched ambition turn love into a transaction more times than I could count. So I made a rule. I never led with money. No luxury car. No job titles that sounded impressive. Just honesty, stripped of spectacle. That rule worked. Until it didn't. I met my girlfriend during her final year of graduate school in Washington, D.C. She was brilliant, driven, and surrounded by people who spoke the language of prestige fluently. From the beginning, I could tell she measured futures in tears. I just didn't realize she'd already decided which one I belonged in. Her graduation party was meant to be a celebration, a moment of pride, a room full of people who mattered to her. Instead, it became the night she told everyone I wasn't enough, financially, socially, or strategically. She thought she was closing a chapter. What she didn't realize was that I was quietly opening a door she'd never be invited through again. Let me take you back to where this started. To understand what happened that night at the Sequoia overlooking the Potomac River, you need to understand who I was before I met Alyssa Whitmore, before the assumptions, before the calculations disguised as concern. I grew up in a modest two-bedroom house outside Columbus, Ohio. My older brother and I shared a room until I left for college. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. My parents worked steady jobs, my father in manufacturing, my mother as a school administrator. They taught us that security wasn't loud, it was consistency. Paid bills. A roof that didn't leak. Dignity that didn't depend on performance. I carried that philosophy into my career. After graduating from Ohio State with a degree in industrial engineering, I moved to Chicago and co-founded a logistics optimization firm with my college roommate. We built AI-driven supply chain software for mid-sized retailers, companies big enough to need efficiency, but small enough to be ignored by the major players. It wasn't glamorous. No one wrote articles about us. We didn't throw launch parties or chase venture capital headlines, but we solved real problems, and companies paid us extremely well to do it. By the time I turned 30, my equity stake was worth north of 8 figures. You'd never know it by looking at me. I drove a grey Honda Accord with a small dent in the rear bumper. I lived in a clean but modest condo in Lincoln Park, nice neighborhood, unremarkable building. I owned 3 suits, all navy or charcoal, no designer labels, no watches that required insurance, riders. After seeing what wealth did to relationships in my 20s, I'd learned to keep success invisible until trust was earned. That's the man who walked into a wine bar near Georgetown University on a cold February evening. That's the man Alyssa Whitmore met. The bar was called Vino Veritas, tucked between a bookstore and a Thai restaurant on a quiet street near the Georgetown campus. Exposed brick, dim lighting, the kind of place where graduate students pretended to study while actually networking. I wasn't there to network. I was there because my business partner's wife had insisted I needed to get out more, and had given me the address with a knowing smile. Alyssa sat 2 seats down from me at the bar, her laptop open, a glass of Malbec barely touched. She wore a cream turtleneck and had her dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. She was arguing with someone on her phone. "No, I understand the concern, but the policy framework we're proposing addresses exactly that gap," she said, her voice measured but firm. "The issue isn't political will. It's structural coordination between agencies." She listened for a moment, then laughed, not warmly. Well, if they want to keep operating in silos, they can explain that to the Appropriations Committee. She ended the call and closed her eyes briefly, exhaling. I looked back at my drink. "Do you ever feel like you're the only person in the room who's read the actual brief?" she asked. I glanced over. She was looking at me now, not smiling but not hostile either. Just tired. "Depends on the room," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Fair answer." "Rough day?" "Rough semester." She picked up her wine. "I'm finishing my master's in international relations. Everyone around me is more interested in sounding smart than actually solving problems. Sounds exhausting." "It is." She studied me for a moment. "You don't look like you're from around here." "I'm not. Chicago." "Business?" "Just visiting." She nodded slowly, cataloging. "What do you do in Chicago?" "I work in logistics tech." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not interest, not dismissal exactly, just notation. "That's steady work," she said, and the kindness in her tone felt like pity. I smiled. "It pays the bills." We talked for another hour. She told me about her thesis on international development funding structures. I listened more than I spoke, which seemed to suit her fine. She had the energy of someone used to rooms where her voice mattered. When I asked if she wanted to get dinner sometime, she hesitated. Not because she wasn't interested, but because she was calculating something. "Sure," she finally said, pulling out her phone. "But I should warn you, I'm pretty busy until graduation." "That's fine." She typed in my number. "What's your last name?" "Hall. Marcus Hall." She paused just for a second, like she was running it through some internal database. Nothing came up. "Nice to meet you, Marcus Hall," she said, smiling now. "I'm Alyssa Whitmore." I shook her hand. Her grip was confident. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Dinners at mid-range restaurants in DuPont Circle and Adams Morgan. Coffee between her classes. Late-night conversations where she talked about her plans, NGOs in Geneva, policy positions in DC, maybe the State Department if the right doors opened. She spoke about the future like it was a map she'd already drawn. I listened, asked questions, supported her ambitions genuinely. But I also noticed patterns. When I suggested restaurants, she'd gently redirect to places more central or easier to get to, which always meant places her classmates frequented. When I mentioned my work, she'd nod politely and change the subject. When I picked her up in my Honda, she'd glance at it the way you'd glance at a temporary condition. It wasn't cruel. It was just assessment. One night, after dinner at a Spanish tapas place she'd chosen, we were walking back toward her apartment when she stopped in front of a Range Rover parked on the street. "I love these," she said, running her hand along the hood. "My dad drives one. They're just so solid, you know? Like they say something about the person." I looked at the car, then at her. "What do they say?" She smiled. "That you've arrived." "Where?" She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know what I mean." I did. 3 months in, she invited me to a dinner party at her parents' house in Bethesda, Maryland. "It's not a big deal," she said over the phone. "Just family. They want to meet you." It was absolutely a big deal. The house was all glass, stone, and calculated taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured lawn. Furniture that looked expensive because it was. Art on the walls that probably came with provenance documents. Her father, Robert Whitmore, worked in international finance. Her mother, Caroline, sat on non-profit boards and spoke in the polished tones of someone who'd never needed to raise her voice to be heard. Dinner was served by staff. "So, Marcus," Robert said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Alyssa tells us you work in logistics." "That's right. Tech side or operations?" "Tech. Software development for supply chain optimization." He nodded slowly. "Competitive field." "It is. Must be challenging to differentiate yourself." "We focus on mid-market clients. Less competition there." Caroline smiled. "That sounds practical." The word hung in the air like an apology. "And where did you go to school?" she asked. "Ohio State." "Ah," another smile. "Big Ten. Wonderful sports programs." "Great engineering school, too," I said evenly. "Of course." The conversation moved on. They asked about my family, my plans, my trajectory. Every question felt like a checkbox on a form I hadn't been given. Alyssa sat beside me, smiling, occasionally touching my arm like she was reassuring me. But she never corrected them, never interrupted their gentle condescension. She just let it happen. On the drive back to D.C., she was quiet. "They liked you," she finally said. "Did they?" "They did. My dad said you seemed grounded." I kept my eyes on the road. That's one word for it. "Marcus." "It's fine, Alyssa." But it wasn't. Alyssa Whitmore didn't become ambitious. She was raised for it. I learned this slowly, in fragments, through stories she told without realizing what they revealed. Her childhood summers were spent in Martha's Vineyard. Her teenage years included semesters abroad in London and Geneva. Her college roommate's father was a senator. Her thesis advisor had worked in 3 presidential administrations. She didn't drop these details to impress. She mentioned them the way someone mentions the weather. Background noise, assumed context. To her, proximity to power was normal, and people who lacked that proximity were temporary. One afternoon in early April, we were having coffee at Busboys and Poets in downtown D.C. She was preparing for her thesis defense, spread out over the table with highlighted articles and post-it notes everywhere. "I'm thinking about applying to the Brookings Institution after graduation," she said, not looking up. "It's competitive, but I have a strong recommendation from Professor Westfield." "That's great. It would be a junior position, but it's about the network. Once you're in those circles, doors open." She finally looked at me. "What about you? Any plans to expand the business?" "We're considering it." "You should. I mean, logistics is steady, but you don't want to plateau, right?" "We're doing fine." "I know. I just mean—" She hesitated, choosing words carefully. "You're smart, Marcus. You could probably aim higher if you wanted to." "Higher than what?" "I don't know. Something more visible, more—" She gestured vaguely. "You know." I didn't push, but the message was clear. She saw my work as ceiling, not foundation. Her friend group reinforced this constantly. They were all graduate students in policy, international relations or law, people who spoke in acronyms and referenced professors by first name. Every conversation was a performance of proximity. At a birthday party for one of her classmates in Georgetown, I stood in a corner, nursing a beer while they debated foreign policy implications of some recent congressional hearing. "The markup language is deliberately vague," one guy said, gesturing with his wine glass. "They're leaving room for executive interpretation." "Which is exactly the problem," Alyssa countered. "You can't build accountability into a framework that's structurally ambiguous." They all nodded seriously. Then someone turned to me. "Marcus, what do you think?" I looked up. "About the markup language?" "Yeah. I don't know enough about it to have an informed opinion." The guy smiled, not unkindly, but with the patience you'd show a child. Fair enough. The conversation moved on. Alyssa touched my arm later. You were quiet tonight. Didn't have much to contribute. That's okay. Not everyone follows that stuff. She kissed my cheek. I'm glad you came. I was starting to understand my role. I was the supportive boyfriend, the steady presence, the person who listened while she shone. And long as I stayed in that lane, everything was fine. But there were moments, small cracks, where I saw something else. One night, we were walking through DuPont Circle after dinner when we passed a Tesla dealership. She stopped, staring at the cars in the window. God, these are beautiful, she said. You want one? She laughed. On a grad student budget? Not happening. But someday. She looked at me. What about you? Ever thought about upgrading? My car works fine. I know, but... She trailed off, then smiled. Never mind. Say it. It's just... You're 31, Marcus. You're allowed to want things. I have things. I mean nice things. Things that reflect where you're going, not just where you've been. I looked at her carefully. Is this about me or you? Her expression shifted, just for a second, into something defensive. I'm just saying you don't have to be so conservative about everything. Conservative means different things to different people. I know. She squeezed my hand. Forget it, I'm just stressed about the thesis. But I didn't forget, because I was starting to realize that Alyssa Whitmore didn't just want a partner. She wanted a cosign. Someone whose success validated hers, someone whose trajectory matched the map she'd drawn. And I didn't fit that map, not as far as she could see. By May, we'd been together for 3 months, and I was starting to feel like an audition that had gone on too long. Alyssa never said anything directly. She didn't have to. It was in the way she introduced me at events. This is Marcus. He works in tech, with a tone that apologized preemptively. It was in how she'd suggest I wear the nicer suit when we had dinner with her classmates. It was in the small corrections. You don't need to tell people you're from Ohio right away. It's fine, but it just sets a tone, you know? I started noticing how often she used the word potential. You have so much potential. The business has potential. I think you could really grow into something. As if I were unfinished. A project. One Saturday afternoon, she was at my apartment in Lincoln Park working on her laptop while I made lunch. She looked around the space like she was seeing it for the first time. Have you ever thought about moving? She asked. Moving where? I don't know. Somewhere more central? Like River North or Streeterville? I like it here. It's fine, I just mean. She closed her laptop. If you're going to be in Chicago long term, you might want to think about your address. Why? Because it matters, Marcus. Where you live says something about you. What does this say? She smiled gently. That you're practical. There was that word again. Despite all this, there were moments when I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. Moments when she'd curl up beside me on the couch and talk about her childhood, her fears, her dreams beyond the credentials. I'm terrified I'm going to end up like my mother, she said one night, her voice soft. What do you mean? She's brilliant. She went to Wellesley. She could have done anything, but she married my dad and became a professional wife. Boards, fundraisers, looking elegant at events. That sounds meaningful. It's decorative. She looked at me. I don't want to be decorative, Marcus. I want to matter. You do matter. I want to matter in rooms where decisions get made. I stroked her hair. You will. She kissed me then, deeply, like she was trying to believe me. And in those moments, I let myself hope that maybe love could be stronger than ambition. I was wrong. The first real warning came 2 weeks before graduation. We were having dinner at Founding Farmers near the White House when she brought up the party. So, my parents are hosting a graduation celebration at the Sequoia, she said casually. It's a pretty big deal. Alumni, family friends, some of my professors. Very formal. Sounds fancy. It is. She paused. I need you to be prepared. For what? For the room. These are people who are used to a certain environment. My dad's colleagues, mom's nonprofit connections. They're going to ask you questions. I can handle questions, Alyssa. I know. She set down her fork. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Why would I feel uncomfortable? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Pity. Because you're not like them, she said quietly. And that's okay. I don't care about that. But they will notice. The words landed like stones. Notice what? Just differences. Your background, your work, the way you carry yourself. How do I carry myself? Marcus, don't. No, seriously. How do I carry myself? She sighed, like someone who doesn't realize what room he's in. Silence. I'm not saying that to hurt you, she added quickly. I'm trying to help you. If you know what to expect, you can prepare. Maybe get a new suit. Maybe talk about the business differently. Just be strategic. Be someone I'm not. Be the best version of yourself. I paid the bill in silence. On the walk back to her apartment, she tried to take my hand. I let her, but barely. I love you, she said at her door. It was the first time she'd said it. I looked at her, this brilliant, beautiful woman who saw me as a problem to solve. I love you too, I said, and I meant it. But I was starting to realize that love without respect is just elaborate pity. The week before graduation, I got invited to a casual family brunch at the Whitmore house in Bethesda. Alyssa assured me it was low-key. It wasn't. Her extended family descended on the house like a summit meeting. Uncles who worked in lobbying, aunts who ran boutique consulting firms, cousins who'd gone to Princeton and Yale. Everyone dressed in that effortlessly expensive way that signals old money. I wore khakis and a button-down. Marcus, Caroline greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So glad you could make it. Come in, come in. Everyone's dying to meet Alyssa's young man. She said young man like I was a phase. The house smelled like expensive brunch, smoked salmon, fresh pastries, coffee from beans that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I was introduced to everyone in rapid succession, names I'd forget in 10 minutes, handshakes that felt like tests. Marcus works in logistics, Alyssa explained to her Uncle David, who nodded, politely. Ah, operations. Software. Right. Everyone's doing software these days. He smiled. Lot of competition in that space. There is. Must be hard to stand out. We manage. He nodded again, already losing interest. This happened repeatedly. Polite questions, surface interest. Then the subtle redirect back to people who mattered more. At one point, I found myself standing alone near the buffet table while Alyssa talked to her cousin about some internship opportunity at the United Nations. Her Aunt Patricia approached me, holding a mimosa. "So, Marcus, Alyssa tells us you're from the Midwest?" "Ohio, yes. That must be such a change coming to the East Coast. It's different. I'm sure it's overwhelming. All these connections, the pace, the expectations." She sipped her drink. "But I'm sure you're doing your best." She said it like a consolation prize. Robert Whitmore pulled me aside after brunch, suggesting we talk in his study. The study was all leather and dark wood, diplomas and awards on the walls, a desk that probably cost more than my car. He gestured for me to sit. "Marcus, I wanted to have a frank conversation with you. Father to someone dating my daughter." I waited. "Alyssa is extraordinary," he continued. "She's brilliant, driven, and she has opportunities ahead of her that will require focus and commitment." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned forward slightly. "Because I've seen this before. Young women with potential getting sidetracked by relationships that don't serve their trajectory. I'm not trying to sidetrack her. I'm sure you're not. But intention isn't the same as impact." He folded his hands. "I'm going to be blunt. My daughter is going places, and whoever is beside her needs to be going those same places, not holding her back. I would never. I'm not saying you would intentionally. I'm saying that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is recognize when you're not the right fit." I stared at him. "Are you asking me to break up with her?" "I'm asking you to think very carefully about what you can offer her, and whether that's really what she deserves." He stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Enjoy the rest of your visit," he said, opening the door. I walked out of that study understanding something fundamental. To the Whitmore family, I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle. The Sequoia was one of Georgetown's premier venues. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac River, crystal chandeliers, the kind of space that whispered prestige. Alyssa's graduation party was scheduled for 7 p.m. on Saturday, May 18th. She'd been anxious about it all week. "I need everything to be perfect," she said Thursday night, lying in my arms. "This is the moment everyone's been waiting for. My parents, my professors, everyone. It's not just about the degree. It's about what comes next. You're going to be amazing." She kissed me. "Promise me you'll—" She trailed off. "I'll what?" "Just be yourself. The best version." I almost laughed. Instead, I kissed her forehead. "I promise." Saturday arrived with clear skies and a knot in my stomach. I picked up the suit I'd had tailored. Nothing flashy, just well-fitted charcoal grey. I drove my Honda to the venue because what else would I drive? The valet looked at it like I'd arrived on a bicycle. Inside, the party was already in full swing. A string quartet played near the windows. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The room was full of people who looked like they belonged in a political thriller. Tailored suits, elegant dresses, conversations conducted in low, important tones. I spotted Alyssa immediately. She wore a midnight blue dress that fit perfectly, her hair styled in waves. She was surrounded by her parents and several people I didn't recognize, probably the alumni donors and family friends she'd mentioned. When she saw me, she smiled, but it was tight. "Marcus!" She came over, kissed my cheek. "You made it." "Of course. You look nice." She adjusted my tie slightly, a gesture that felt more corrective than affectionate. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." The next hour was a blur of introductions. Each one followed the same pattern. "This is Marcus, my boyfriend. He works in tech." Polite nods. polite questions, polite disinterest. I could feel people cataloguing me, measuring me against some invisible standard and finding me wanting. And Alyssa, she was performing. Every introduction felt like an apology. Every explanation of my work felt like a disclaimer. I wasn't being introduced as an equal. I was being introduced as a condition she was working through. Around 8:30, her father clinked his glass for attention. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Robert began, his voice carrying that effortless authority. "Tonight, we celebrate not just an achievement, but a beginning. Alyssa has worked incredibly hard to get to this moment, and we couldn't be prouder." Applause. Alyssa smiled, gracious. "But beyond the degree, what we're really celebrating is potential. Alyssa has always been destined for remarkable things, and as she moves into the next phase of her life, professional opportunities, personal growth, meaningful connections, we're excited to see her surrounded by people who match her caliber." He looked directly at her. Not at me, at her. "To Alyssa," he said, raising his glass. "May you always aim high and surround yourself with excellence." The room echoed the toast. I drank my champagne and tasted ash. Half an hour later, Alyssa pulled me aside onto the balcony overlooking the river. The air was cool, the city lights reflected off the water. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay? You've been quiet." "I'm fine." "Marcus?" "I'm fine, Alyssa. Really." She studied my face in the dim light. Then she took a breath. And I knew. I knew before she said it. "We need to talk," she began. And just like that, the ground shifted. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Alyssa said, her voice careful. "About us. About where we're both headed." The Potomac moved silently below us. Inside, the party continued. Laughter, music, celebration. "Okay," I said. "You're a good person, Marcus. You really are. And I do love you. But," she flinched slightly, "but I don't think we're aligned. Not in the ways that matter for the long term. Aligned. I'm about to start my career, real career, and I need to be with someone who's on the same trajectory, someone who understands the world I'm moving into, someone from the right circles. That's not fair, isn't it?" I kept my voice level. "Your father made it pretty clear 3 days ago that I'm not good enough for you." "He didn't say that. He said I'd hold you back." She looked away. "He's protective. He's a snob. And so are you." "Marcus, I'm not angry, Alyssa. I'm just stating facts." I turned to face her fully. "From the beginning, you've been measuring me against some standard I was never going to meet. My car, my apartment, my job, the way I talk, the way I dress. None of it was ever enough because I wasn't born into the right family or groomed for the right rooms." Tears welled in her eyes. "That's not true." "It is, and you know it." She wiped her eyes, composing herself with the same skill she used in debates. "I think we want different things," she said finally. "I need someone who's ambitious in the same ways I am. Someone who wants to be seen, to matter. And you," she gestured helplessly, "you're content being invisible." "No," I said quietly. "I'm content being underestimated." Something flickered across her face, confusion, maybe. But before she could respond, her mother appeared at the balcony door. "Alyssa, darling, people are asking for you." Alyssa glanced back at me, then at her mother. "I should go," she said. "Yeah, you should." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something more. But whatever it was, stayed locked behind her perfectly practiced composure. She walked back into the party. I stood on the balcony for another moment, looking out at the lights of Georgetown across the water. Then I pulled out my phone, made one call, and waited. 20 minutes later, I walked back into the main room. The party was in full swing. Alyssa was surrounded by well-wishers, smiling that perfect smile that made people feel chosen. I wove through the crowd until I found her father. "Robert," I said. He turned, his expression already dismissive. "Marcus, enjoy the rest of your evening." "I will. I just wanted to thank you. For the clarity. You were right. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need to recognize when someone isn't the right fit." He studied me, trying to determine if I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. "I'm glad you understand," he said carefully. "I do. And I hope Alyssa finds someone who matches her caliber." I shook his hand. Then I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Alyssa's voice. "Marcus? Where are you going?" I turned. She was pushing through the crowd, confused. "Home," I said simply. "But the party isn't for me. We both know that." Her eyes widened. "Marcus, wait." But I was already moving. Through the foyer, past the coat check, out the front doors. The valet scrambled for my ticket. "Actually," I said, "I won't need that." Behind me I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. The distant thump of rotors. People started filing out onto the front steps, drawn by the noise. The helicopter descended onto the venue's front lawn. A sleek black Airbus H-130. The words, "Hall Dynamics," painted along the fuselage in silver letters. The pilot was my business partner, Derek, who'd been more than happy to help after I'd explained the situation. The crowd stared. Alyssa stood frozen at the top of the steps, her hand over her mouth. I walked across the grass as the rotors slowed to an idle. Then I turned back, found her eyes in the crowd, and smiled. Not cruel, not triumphant, just free. "Thank you for helping me see who I really needed to be," I called out. Then I climbed into the helicopter. Through the window, I watched Alyssa's face, shock melting into comprehension, comprehension into horror. Robert stood beside her, his expression carved from stone. Caroline looked like she might faint. Derek grinned at me from the pilot's seat. "That's one hell of an exit, Marcus." "Yeah," I said. "It really is." The helicopter lifted smoothly into the night sky. Below, the party I was never really invited to grew smaller and smaller, until it was just lights on the water. And then nothing at all. The flight back to Chicago took 3 hours with a refueling stop in Columbus. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the eastern seaboard give way to the Appalachian darkness, then the flat geometric lights of the Midwest. Derek knew better than to talk. He'd been my business partner for 9 years. He'd seen me navigate hostile board meetings, failed product launches, and client betrayals. He knew when I needed silence. It wasn't until we were approaching Chicago that he finally spoke. "You good?" I considered the question. Was I good? I'd just ended a relationship I'd genuinely cared about. I'd revealed wealth I'd deliberately hidden. I'd made a dramatic exit that would be gossiped about in DC circles for months. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." She had no idea, did she? None. Jesus. He shook his head. "What was the plan? Just never tell her?" "The plan was to wait until trust was earned. until I knew she loved me for who I was, not what I had. And she didn't. Derek was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, he said finally, you handled that with a lot more class than I would have. I didn't do it for revenge. I know. But damn, man, that had to feel good. I smiled slightly. It didn't feel bad. We landed at a private airfield outside Chicago just before midnight. My car, the real one, not the Honda, was waiting. A Mercedes S-Class, black, understated. I only drove it when I needed to. Tonight, I needed to. Derek walked me to the car. You going to be okay? He asked. I will be. Take a few days. We've got things covered at the office. I know. Thanks, Derek. Any time. He clapped my shoulder. And Marcus, for the record, you deserve someone who sees you, all of you, without needing a helicopter to prove it. I drove home through empty streets, the city skyline glowing against Lake Michigan. My real apartment wasn't in Lincoln Park. It was a penthouse in Streeterville with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. 3 bedrooms I didn't need. Art I'd bought because I liked it, not because it was an investment. This was the life I'd built. Quiet. Comfortable. Mine. I poured myself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the water. My phone buzzed. Text messages. Dozens of them. Most from numbers I didn't recognize. A few from mutual acquaintances in D.C., one from Alyssa's roommate, and 17 from Alyssa herself. I scrolled through them. Marcus, please call me. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. I set the phone down without responding. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choice based on what she could see. I'd made mine based on what I'd felt. And in the end, we'd both gotten exactly what we'd asked for. The story spread faster than I expected. By Monday morning, it was all over Georgetown's social circles. By Tuesday, it had reached Chicago. By Wednesday, someone had posted a grainy video of the helicopter landing on TikTok, and it went viral. Boyfriend reveals he's secretly a millionaire at his girlfriend's graduation party after she breaks up with him for not being successful enough. The comments were predictably brutal. She fumbled the bag so hard, imagine breaking up with someone for being too modest. LMAU. My man said, watch this, and called a helicopter. He dodged a bullet with designer shoes. I didn't engage with any of it. But the attention had consequences. By the end of the week, 3 major outlets had reached out for interviews. 2 of them offered money. 1 wanted to option the story for a short film. I declined all of them. This wasn't about publicity, it was about dignity, but others weren't so restrained. Alyssa called 63 times in the first week. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed through stages of grief. Shock. Marcus, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? We could have. Please, just call me back. Bargaining. I know I messed up. I see that now. But we can fix this. We can start over. Please, Marcus. I love you. Anger. You lied to me. For months. You let me think you were someone you weren't. That's manipulative, Marcus. You played me. Desperation. Everyone's talking about me. They're laughing at me. My parents are furious. My career is... Marcus, please. You don't understand what this is doing to me. I listened to each one once, then deleted them. On day 8, she showed up at my office. Hall Dynamics was headquartered in a modern building in the West Loop. Glass and steel, minimalist design. The kind of space that screamed, we're doing just fine. She walked into the lobby in a blazer and jeans, looking exhausted. I need to see Marcus Hall, she told the receptionist. Do you have an appointment? I'm his girlfriend. The receptionist glanced at the security monitor where I was watching from my office upstairs. I called down, "Send her up." She looked smaller in my office, not physically, but energetically, like someone who'd realized too late they'd miscalculated something fundamental. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Nice office." "Thanks." Silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "You never asked." "That's not fair. You deliberately hid." "I told you exactly what I did. Logistics optimization software. That was the truth. You just assumed it wasn't successful." She flinched. "So this was a test?" "No. It was self-protection." "From what?" "From people who only love potential, not the person." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not true. I did love you. You loved the version of me you thought you could improve. I wanted you to reach your potential. Alyssa." I kept my voice gentle. "I already had. You just couldn't see it because it didn't come with the right symbols, the right car, the right address, the right last name. I wasn't that shallow. You were exactly that shallow. And so was your family, and so were your friends." I stood. "And you know what? I don't blame you. You were raised in a world where those things matter, where proximity to power is the currency. I get it." "Then why?" "Because I don't live in that world. I built something real, something that mattered, without needing anyone's approval. And I wanted a partner who could love me for that, for who I was, not who I appeared to be." She was crying now, openly. "I do love you. I did. I didn't know." "You knew enough. You knew I was kind, loyal, honest, supportive. But that wasn't enough because it didn't come with the right packaging." "Marcus." "I hope you find what you're looking for, Alyssa. I really do. Someone from the right family, the right schools, someone who matches your map. I don't want someone else. I want you." "No," I said, quietly. "You want what you thought I wasn't. And now that you know I am, you want the status that comes with it." The truth of that hung between us. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know. Can we start over?" "No." "Why not?" "Because respect isn't something you can retrofit. Either it's there from the beginning or it's not." I walked to the door, opened it. "Take care of yourself, Alyssa. I mean that." She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she walked out. I watched from my office window as she crossed the street below, got into her car, and drove away. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not grief. Just quiet. 3 months later, I met Simone. Not at a wine bar or a political event or anywhere calculated. I met her at a community garden in Lincoln Park on a Saturday morning where I'd started volunteering after Derek suggested I do something normal for once. She was on her knees in the dirt, planting tomatoes, wearing overalls and a Northwestern hoodie. When she looked up, her smile was immediate and genuine. "You know anything about tomatoes?" she asked. "Absolutely nothing." "Perfect. Me neither. Want to figure it out together?" That's how it started. We spent 2 hours planting things incorrectly while talking about everything except our jobs. She told me about growing up in Detroit, about her mom who taught middle school, about how she'd moved to Chicago for a nursing position at Northwestern Memorial and fell in love with the city. When I told her I was from Ohio, she didn't catalog it. She smiled. Big Ten buddies. "You go to Northwestern?" "State school in Michigan, but I did my graduate work at Northwestern." She wiped dirt on her overalls. "What do you do?" I run a tech company. Cool. What kind? Supply chain optimization. Extremely boring unless you're really into logistics. She laughed. My brother works in logistics. He says the same thing. And that was it. No further calculation. No measuring. Just conversation. We started seeing each other regularly. Coffee before her shifts. Dinners at neighborhood spots. Long walks along the lakefront where we talked about books, family, dreams that didn't require explanation. She knew I had money. It was impossible to hide completely. But she never asked how much or treated me differently because of it. One night, 6 weeks in, we were having dinner at her apartment. She'd made spaghetti carbonara from scratch, insisted I couldn't help, and made me sit on her couch while she narrated the process. Her apartment was small, warm, full of plants and books and photos of people who clearly loved her. So, she said, bringing 2 plates over, I have a confession. Okay. My brother Googled you. I paused. And he says you're, quote, stupid successful. Which, honestly, I figured. But I wanted you to know that I know, and that it doesn't change anything. It doesn't? No. She twirled pasta on her fork. I mean, it's impressive. You clearly worked hard, but it's not why I like you. Why do you like me? She thought about it. Because you're kind. Because you listen. Because you plant tomatoes wrong with strangers on Saturday mornings. She smiled. Because you're just you. No performance. No agenda. Just Marcus. Something in my chest loosened. I like you too, I said. Good. She clinked her water glass against mine. Because I was worried this carbonara wouldn't seal the deal. A year later, I proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or some grand gesture. I proposed in that same community garden on a Sunday morning, with dirt under my nails and tomatoes growing crooked in the plot we'd somehow kept alive. Marry me, I said, kneeling in the soil. She stared at me, shocked. Then she started laughing. You're serious? Completely. We're in a vegetable garden. I know. I'm wearing overalls. I know. She pulled me up, kissed me hard, and said, yes. Obviously, yes. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony in Lincoln Park, family and close friends. Derek gave a speech that was both touching and roasted me perfectly. Simone's mom cried happy tears. No helicopter, no spectacle, no one measuring anyone. Just love, real, earned, equal. Years later, someone asked me if I regretted how things ended with Alyssa. I thought about it. No, I said finally. She taught me something important. What's that? That the right person doesn't need you to prove your worth. They see it from the beginning, not in what you drive or where you live or who you know, just in who you are when no one's watching. And Simone saw that? I smiled. Simone saw me, planting tomatoes wrong, and thought, that's the guy. That's it? That's everything. I still keep the Honda. It sits in the parking garage of my real building, next to the Mercedes I barely drive. Sometimes I take it out, drive it through the city. Remember who I was when I bought it. The kid from Ohio who learned that comfort isn't loud. It's stability, silence, knowing your bills are paid and your name isn't attached to drama. I built that silence into something real, and when the right person came along, she didn't ask me to make it louder. She just sat beside me in it and made it feel like home. The end.